Great Grand Rising to all. And thank you for viewing, subscribe, like, share. In this episode, we'll be concentrating on the contrast of, well, the two main palettes that started it all. You see, colors are very important, and more often than not, we're not really given an incentive as to why, other than the fact that scientifically we all see in different colors. And visually, colors have a way of allowing us to see things from, well, differences of perspectives and points of view. You know, there was once a time where I was biased towards certain colors. But over time, I've grown to appreciate the colors due to the nature of the blending. Now, I'll read a quote from my journal. If I can find it. Ha! Petty. Anyway. Gold. Significance. The sun, man, energy, wealth, financial wisdom, my bad, and conscientious mind, alluring happiness, and artistry. Of all things. The planet that gold represents is the sun. And the day that gold represents is Sunday. The astrological sign that gold represents also is Leo. Deities for the sun and gold, any sun god and Apollo. Now, not to be funny, not that I can't read or anything, because I can read just fine. I want both cameras to note that I wrote this in gold like an idiot. The reason being is because sometimes, just sometimes, we have a tendency to, well, in a lack of a better sense, keep ourselves hidden from things that we should rather take time out to explore. So to get a better in-depth meaning of the things that you do, you have to trick your mind psychologically beyond the things that you would normally condition yourself to do, beyond the caveat of your own comfort. Doing this has its side effects, not very many drawbacks, but nonetheless, doing this has a great deal of value if you know how to, well, in lack of a better sense, know how to traverse your mind and keep clear of your own sense of judgment beyond anything. May it be your emotions, something neutral, something you feel on the fence or uneasy about. Ways to express this are through different outlets. They say the best one is art. Funny story. How I got involved with art. I grew up during a time where art was dying. I tell quite a few people this story, and if you know me and you've heard it before, feel free to let people in now as I start. You see, back in the day, there was a time where I could see things from a different perspective, yeah, but already configured together. So, you know how people say, I've been doing this shit ever since it came out of my... Yeah, I was one of those people. I technically been drawing ever since, or dealing with any type of art ever since I was birthed, or I came into existence again. Being that I am finite in the absolute, I don't think I'm reincarnated. I just have a very leery theory that either A, I'm being made to be a thing, or I'm already the thing and I don't know it. Either way, it's fun finding out. So, without further ado, let's go over our mediums, shall we? Okay. If you notice, before I went on this little off the beaten path tangent, note the color that I am wearing. Note the background. You guessed it. These are called charcoal pastels, or charcoal. Okay. The reason why they say soft, medium, or hard is because soft, medium, hard. Anyway, although that's very corny, I'll show the point of why I'm saying this. You see, to make a picture full, sometimes, in order for the darkness to be seen, it has to be on a white surface. But an interesting story. So let me not bore you anymore without further ado. Right now, I'm going to be giving a brief summary about what I'm going to draw. Note what I said. Today's element is wind and sky. Now, as I manifest my rendition of what I think it may or may not look like, note that I will only be using a pencil, mechanical, white pastel chalk, charcoal, eraser. Now, I bet you're wondering, why an eraser? Well, you see, the medium or paper that we're going to be using will be white. White. To make a perfect sky, Bob Ross would take a pencil, or, well, not a pencil, a paintbrush, dip it into his little painter's canvas thingy, and then take the paintbrush and go across the paper freely, like so. Now, although he would do this, he would do that to create a contrast, a depth in the background or void of nothing. So, with this soft piece of charcoal, I'm going to create a bit of sky. So remember, I went left and right. Now what you do is, randomization is a very strange and odd thing. So, I'll be using my left hand for this one. Take the charcoal and go around counterclockwise. See? Repeat this again. One more time. Okay. Now, the reason why this is soft is because it makes like almost like a jet black color. When you mix soft with white, it does this, creates a gray. So what you do is you gently smear the charcoal. Blending the colors thusly like so. Now, what do you see? Now, with your pencil, take time to draw definitions in the line. Or not. But how depth works is contrast is always in the eye of the beholder. So again, make sure lines with your eraser. Okay. Sure lines. Take your eraser and just get rid of what you don't need. And go in the opposite direction of where you started in order to create layers through the clouds. Alright. After you erase what you didn't need, now you fill in the spaces in order to create your depth. Now, perception is always entailed by the beholder or perspective in which you see it. So don't get too lost in where is where, you know what I'm saying? All right. On the white side, take your pencil, go up and around. Create like an M and repeat. Up and around. Create like a W or an O and repeat and around. And around. Repeat this until you get like a satisfied feeling of a fully accomplished and realized sky. You can take your time, push it to the furthest extreme, you know, or not. Now, note something as I'm drawing this. More often than not, I've always told my students, and I tell my students quite frequently, that A, there are no mistakes, and B, the best recipes are always your own. Now, nature in general has a tendency to be, well, by its own definition, designed radical in nature. And so, randomization plays a major part in the visage or the viewing of said nature. In other words, try not to get caught up in a pattern. Remember, the best recipes are your own, right? If you want to do pattern art and that art style or your type of clouds are deliberately like that, then by all means go right ahead. But remember, over specializing, you're breeding weakness. Now, without pressing too hard on the paper, continue your clouds. Something satisfying about creating nature. See? Now, earlier in a previous video, I touched on how an anamorphic design was any type of design that was intended to be seen one way at first glance. But if you switch it around, it doubles and alters as something else. Now, for those of you who've been fortunate enough or lucky enough to actually see it, there'll be a pilot episode showing, and I'll, quickly delete it because, I want to. But outside of that, it's one of those things where I need you to listen to me. So, in my absence, I've hoped most of my efforts brought me to a place where it made your heart grow fonder. And if not for me, just for the passions of your own endeavors and desires or wants or needs or whatever. But I digress. Moving right along. The contrast of your depth at first, distance in which a thing is from your sight's viewpoint to what you can see and what you choose your audience to see. Fun fact. It's rumored that Da Vinci studied the folds in a curtain just to understand which direction the light was coming from and how to depict that on paper. So he sat there and drew different fold patterns in a curtain until he mastered it. Now keep in mind, 5 minutes a day is all you need. maybe a minute at a time, or the whole 5 minutes all at once. 5 minutes a day, 2 months to 2 weeks, you'll be a master at every or anything you set out to actually do. The time one takes in an art style always puts them in this place of tremendous focus. For some people, this is dangerous. For others, captivating. For some, they miss it. But either way, I'm sure it's fascinating. It's how you receive it that makes the point or the difference. In any and every case. You know, I'm almost satisfied with my old gloomy sky. Throw a little bit more details in. Now, for the viewers at home and those who will happen upon these videos, note that I am drawing these in real time, but I am filming from several different angles. Reason being is because for authenticity, and also, well, it's something cool to see when you're able to manifest something in real life that you're always been curious about, but you didn't never tell anyone, or no one should know but you. The more random your cloud pattern is, the better. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to sit back and continue my cloud picture as I conclude this part in a long line of, well, artistic and educational videos. By the end of the excerpt, be sure to leave your comments in the box, subscribe, like, share, and always, always remain safe, calm, and equivalent, full of energy, will, and balance. Thank you so very much. Until next time.
And was a fate destined for Dante in his adult life. Medieval Italy was not a united country. The Holy Roman Empire, centered in Germany, had little influence in Italy. The most powerful figure in Italy was the Pope, who ruled certain areas that were known as the Papal States. Popes at that time didn't hesitate to act as heads of state. Some popes commanded troops in battle. The Papal States were mostly centered around Rome, and this left the rest of Italy divided into independent provinces and city-states. These smaller principalities constantly made and broke treaties with each other and with the Pope, as they feared being overthrown by each other. So while the time of Dante was supposed to be civilized, there was no consistent or enlightened rule in his home. Dante married when he was about 20. It was an arranged marriage, as was the custom, and the couple had at least 3 children. But those events had little meaning to Dante compared to the day he met Beatrice, his inspiration. They were children when they met. Dante was 9 and Beatrice was 8. He loved her immediately and dedicated his life to her at first sight. He didn't see her again for 9 years. At their second meeting, Beatrice spoke to him for the first time, calling him by name. They probably had few meetings after that. Dante wrote many poems about Beatrice, her loveliness and grace. To him she embodied love. We'll see Beatrice in the Divine Comedy as Dante's guide in heaven. Beatrice died young, in her 20s, but her influence on Dante was lifelong. We may question the love of a 9-year-old, especially since he never had what we would call a relationship with Beatrice. However, their relationship and his feeling for Beatrice is in the best tradition of the medieval concept of courtly love. In those times, marriages were arranged and not meant to be alliances of love. Men and women found true love outside of marriage. True love, that is, courtly love, is not necessarily a sexual relationship, but more of an idealized feeling, like a knight's chivalry for his lady. Beatrice's role as Dante's spiritual inspiration is very real, no matter what we may think of their human relationship. To return to Dante's life, he studied extensively, both in theology and in philosophy. He also served in the army in 2 important Florentine battles and was politically active. He was very outspoken in criticizing Pope Boniface VIII, who ruled from 1294 to 1303. This pope was later instrumental in Dante's exile from Florence, and the pope appears in the Divine Comedy. Beatrice's last words to Dante are a condemnation of this pope. Dante was part of a powerful ruling faction in Florence, but fortunes changed and the opposing party seized charge of the city. Dante was in Rome when the new party took control and charged him with graft, plotting against the Pope, and conspiring against the Peace of Florence. In his absence, Dante was sentenced to death by burning. That began Dante's exile from Florence. He dreamed that one ruler would bring order to Italy and an end to the constant plotting and his exile. He hoped that the Holy Roman Emperor, Henry VII, would do this. When Henry died without extending his authority to Italy, Dante lost hope for the country's rule and that he could return to Florence. Dante, like so many Italian citizens, deeply loved his native city where his family had lived for many generations. This loyalty to home made his exile even more bitter. The Divine Comedy was written in Dante's exile, a time when he lived in a number of different courts throughout northern Italy. He was respected for his intelligence, knowledge, and political talents. Dante died while on a diplomatic mission to Venice. He's buried in the Italian city of Ravenna, in a monastery of Franciscan friars. Now we'll give a brief overview of the Divine Comedy before we tell you some of the details of this work. First, the title. The word comedy in this instance doesn't mean something that's amusing. It's taken from an Italian word that means a prosperous ending after a difficult beginning. The poem was written in Italian, which was a revolutionary thing in Dante's time. Most important works then were written in Latin. Italian was considered the language of the masses, and it was a new concept that people would read and enjoy poetic literature. The comedy is written in 3 books: Hell, Purgatory, and Paradise. Each book is a place in the world beyond our own, and Dante visits each of these realms. Not only do we see what happens there, but we get to know how the realms are physically constructed. Most editions of the book show artists' renderings of the levels and geography of Hell, Purgatory, and Paradise based on Dante's explicit descriptions. He's divided these places into specific circles, and each one represents the result of an earthly experience for good or bad. We'll go into detail about that later. It's interesting to notice Dante's use of numbers. There are 3 books in the Divine Comedy which correspond to 3 places in the afterlife. There are 33 short poems called cantos in each book. The extra canto that introduces the Divine Comedy makes for a total of 100 cantos. Each poem is written in a particular form where each 3 lines has a rhyming element. Hell, Purgatory, and Paradise are divided into 9 major sections, but each has an additional vestibule or level, making a total of 10 levels in each realm. Dante used numbers symbolically, especially the numbers 3, 9, 10, and 100. In Christian theology, 3 is the number of the Holy Trinity, God as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. In the Middle Ages, 10 was considered a number of perfection. Multiples of 3 and 10 abound in the book. There isn't time to go into other occult details, but Dante's poetry is filled with numerical and astrological significance. For example, each of 3 sections of the book ends with the word stars. This use of astrology and numbers goes beyond superstition. He's pointing out that there's an orderly structure to God's universe, and that structure is represented in this poem. There are scholars who spend their whole lives going through Dante's work and searching for meanings. We can only describe some of the most significant parts of this complex story, which asks a question that we all want to know about. What happens after we die? And now, let's look at the most popular of the 3 books that make up the Divine Comedy, the Inferno. Then we'll explore the other 2 books, Purgatory and Paradise. In his first verse in the Inferno, the entire poem is told in the first person by Dante. Dante says, "When I had journeyed half of our life's way, I found myself within a shadowed forest, for I had lost the path that does not stray." Most scholars agree that Dante is referring to the biblical age of 35 when he refers to half our life's way. But even if we didn't know that, we know that Dante is saying that halfway through his life he found himself lost. Dante uses an interesting phrase, that he's lost the path that does not stray. For mystics, this means that Dante has lost the spiritual path, a path that is always straight to God. So Dante says that he was on the path, but now he's lost. He can't even remember how he got to the forest, because he was too full of sleep when he strayed from the path. This is a reference to being asleep to God, which resulted in the poet's adventure. 3 beasts appear, frightening Dante, but a guide comes to help him, the Roman poet Virgil, who wrote the epic poem The Aeneid. The Aeneid is discussed in another session of the Instant Expert series, but we should know a little of it here. The Aeneid, the story of Italy's founding, predicts that Italy will be the world's first civilized government. But the ideal Roman justice has obviously been lost by Dante's time. So perhaps Dante hoped that his poem could inspire a rebirth of the noble spirit that Virgil predicted. A footnote here. Italy and Europe would experience a cultural rebirth in the Renaissance, which started about 100 years after the comedy was written. Also, the hero of the Aeneid, Aeneas, goes through many trials to found Italy and Rome, including a trip to the underworld of the dead, a trip Dante is about to take. To return to the woods, Virgil offers to lead Dante through hell, the Inferno. Dante is afraid. He knows that Virgil's hero Aeneas and the Christian St. Paul went to hell during their lifetime, but how can he expect to live through such a trial? He doesn't think himself a hero or a saint. Virgil reassures Dante and says that he, Virgil, was sent by Beatrice, Dante's beloved, to guide him. Here is a description of Dante's hell. First, it's shaped like a funnel and descends into earth, getting smaller towards the center. Satan is at the center of the funnel, receiving all the dirt and pain that washes down from the earth. On the way down this funnel, Dante and Virgil go through levels. Each level describes a kind of sin and punishment to match. Some of the levels are divided by rivers, chasms, or walls. At each level, sinners are punished according to the type and degree of their sin. The two proceed to the gates of hell and read the famous inscription, "Abandon all hope, you who enter here." Now Dante begins his trip through the Inferno, a place of devastating horror. He and Virgil first enter the vestibule to hell, a place where people who lived without commitment to either good or evil are punished by eternally chasing a flag that's beyond their grasp. Then the two enter the first of 9 descending concentric circles, the levels of the Inferno. The first circle is limbo, for people who lived good lives but were never baptized into the Catholic religion. They're not being punished, but they do suffer the pain of never seeing Dante's Christian God. There are great poets here, such as the Greek Homer and many of the ancient world's philosophers. A few biblical figures who died before the time of Jesus Christ were taken out of limbo to heaven. They include Adam, Noah, Moses, and others. It should be noted that this Catholic doctrine is still taught. It is also a belief in many Protestant faiths. Given the fact that most people on the earth, now and in the past, live in countries with little interest in or exposure to Jesus Christ, it's interesting that Western religions grant salvation only to their own followers. In contrast, Eastern religious philosophies often view love for any god as valid and redeeming. Virgil and Dante enter the second circle of the Inferno, where a judge assesses each sinner and assigns the correct circle for punishment. This is really where hell begins, and is marked by a dark whirlwind rising from a cleft in the ground that was caused by an earthquake at the time of Jesus Christ's crucifixion. This circle is for the sin of lust, and Virgil points out some famous lovers in the violent winds. Dante is moved by 2 famous lovers, one of whom was married. The two fell in love while reading the story of Lancelot and Guinevere. When they reached the part of the story where Lancelot kisses Guinevere, they couldn't keep themselves from imitating that, and, as they say to Dante, that day we read no further. Dante's view of love must be remembered here. As many of his time felt, ideal love was spiritual, not physical. The next circle is for the sin of gluttony, and there is an unending rainstorm here that makes the damned souls howl continuously. A 3-headed dog tears the souls apart in an ongoing action. One of the attributes of hell is that there is no end to the punishment. It keeps repeating itself. In this circle, Dante speaks with a Florentine named Ciacco, which means pig. Ciacco predicts the outcome of a Florentine political struggle and tells Dante that there are only 2 just Florentines, and no one listens to them. This is the first of Dante's many interactions with Florentines and other Italians who ask about each other and comment on the past or future of Italy. Often what they said reflects Dante's opinions or hopes. In this first interchange, Dante asks where 2 dead Florentines are, and Ciacco tells Dante that he will meet them further down in hell. In the 4th circle of hell, Dante and Virgil meet Pluto, the god of wealth, and see those who sin through greed or through overspending. These 2 groups are forever rolling huge boulders against each other as they taunt each other for having the opposite characteristic. But both groups, the hoarders and the spenders, share the same basic sin. The 5th circle is for the wrathful and the sullen. The wrathful souls are stuck in mud, and they strike each other with their hands, heads, and feet. Beneath them in the stagnant water are the souls of the sullen. It's easy to understand these punishments. Those who are angry are literally stuck in the act, and those who pout are ignored and silent underwater. Virgil and Dante take a ferry to the next circle. As the boat starts to sink under Dante's weight, the soul of a Florentine named Argenti comes from under the water to ask for help. Dante recognizes him as a violent and selfish man who acted against Florence, and Dante curses him. Other souls in the water pull Argenti down and furiously attack him, which pleases Dante. While Dante seems unkind, we need to remember his intense loyalty to Florence and his anger with those who harmed